Didn't I?
Yep. Yep.
Can I get a phone book?
What?
Can I get a phone book to stand on?
Hey Kyle, Sarah told me that I need to tell you, bring you a crate.
So what?
That I need to bring you a crate.
A crate to stand on, yeah.
We've got one upstairs.
Okay. All your minutes.
Grace, mercy, and peace to you from God our Father and our Lord Jesus Christ. I love stories. I love hearing them. I love telling them. One of my favorite things is being at a family get-together, like a birthday or whatever, and listening to everybody just visit, and I start slipping stuff in, trying to get my dad or my uncles to tell a story about my grandpa or me and my sister when we were a kid. Like this one time, my grandpa took my dad and uncle to play around the golf in northern Michigan. By the second hole, my uncle made a noise in my dad's backswing, caused him to dump a shot, and they laughed. But my grandpa, he was an avid golfer, he's a great athlete, but he took the game very, very seriously. So he immediately just jumps into him and said, "You guys better quit goofing off and take this serious. This is golf." By the third hole, my grandpa takes a backswing, and my dad and uncle make a noise in it, and he dusts his shot, and he turns around and says, "Oh, it's goofing off? You just ruined my whole game." And then they went on to play the rest of the 18 holes. They didn't even get the grace of playing the front nine. Or this other time, when I was a kid, my parents would leave me at my grandma's house, and I would always hide, and they would have to come find me when they came to pick me up. And this one time, my sister was coming home from the hospital for the first time. She was a newborn. And I was at my grandma's, and I was hiding behind this chair in the den and waiting for my parents to come home. Well, as soon as I got home, I totally forgot that I was hiding, and I ran out to greet them and see my sister. I got so excited. And when I got there, I remembered I was hiding, and I hightailed it back to my spot, but I didn't quite make it. And I tripped over myself, and I smashed my face on the mantle of the fireplace. So as soon as my parents brought my little sister home, they immediately had to turn around and go back to the hospital and get me stitches. And these are lighthearted examples of story, but the reason I like them is because they show who I am and where I came from. That's why I love getting my parents and my uncles to tell stories. Like, from my grandpa, that's where I get my competitive nature. And I get my sense of humor from my dad and uncle. Even today, I still get too excited about things, even to a fault. This is illustrated by my faceplant story. We use narrative and story for entertainment, but it also has a deeper function that we can use it for. I'm studying in a social work program at St. Louis University, and as a social worker, we use story to establish a context for a client. By having a client tell their story, we can identify strengths and weaknesses in their life, and then start to work with them. We use story to identify what's most important. So in the text, we have Mary taking Jesus to the temple for the first time by Jewish tradition. So I can just imagine Mary standing there in the temple and just thinking back over what's been happening since she first got married. Is she married young? Angels? All of a sudden she's got a baby, she's pregnant out of wedlock. Joseph's not okay with it, but he's going with it because he had a dream too. And so now they're in the temple, and she's looking, and across the temple she sees this old man smiling, and he's just bounding towards her. And I imagine it's pretty startling, especially when this old man got her and scooped her baby out of her arms. And he looked at her baby, and he looked at her. And then he looked up to heaven and said, "Lord, you're letting your servant return and go in peace. For my eyes have seen your salvation." They were blown away by what he said. And then the old man looked at Mary, and he said, "Your son marks the rise and fall of many in Israel." But he didn't stop there. He went on a little further. And he said, "Your son will also be a sword in your heart also." See, she didn't know it at the time, but what he was referring to was the crucifixion. I can't even imagine that as a mother, having to know that not only is your son going to be something that causes you suffering, but you're going to find out that he's going to be humiliated and beaten and crucified right in front of you. I imagine that brought a lot of fear. What the old man was trying to point out was that at the bigger picture, her son was the salvation. Her son was the hope of Israel. So what we're looking at face value, while Mary was seeing fear, seeing a weakness, what she was really looking at was a strength. So what about us? Our story is the direct opposite of Mary. We have all these things that we think are strengths in our lives, but they really, when it boils down to it, they're becoming our downfall. They're becoming a weakness. We become so advanced. We're so connected. We made so many developments over the last 100 years, 10 years even. Because we've become so connected, we have iPhones, Facebook, Twitter. We can get a hold of anyone, anytime, anywhere, about anything. Because of this and all this stuff coming in, we become tolerant of everything. And it's made us desensitized to the world. Any decision, any lifestyle choice, any worldview, anything goes as long as it's socially acceptable. This has become a weakness because we're letting the world creep in and we're losing our focus. What about how fast we can get things done? This is definitely a strength. We can multitask like has never been seen before. I can order a pair of shoes on my iPhone from this pulpit and have them here tomorrow. It's pretty impressive. And they're going to be cool shoes. I can get a plane ticket to Michigan and be home in 3 hours. This is something 100 years ago would have taken days. And something like if a blacksmith was working with metal, it would take him days or weeks to finish his project. And now we can have 50 to 100 cars off the line in an hour. We're so fast, and so we get things done so quick. But what's this caused? We become impatient. We know what we want, and we want it now. And because it's so easy to get what we want, it's also made us self-indulgent. How about all the information that we have access to? It kind of ties into with how connected we are. But we have all these things coming in. We can learn about anything from any event in the world. Everything's coming in. We have internet, TV, newspapers, movies, video games. All of that's coming in all the time. But when we're focused on everything, what are we really focused on? We're becoming distracted. And where our focus should be on the important things, we're becoming focused on things that are not important at all. And we can learn what we can learn from Mary's story is to see through these weaknesses and see the bigger picture. All these weaknesses we have, what really matters is the salvation that's given in Jesus. So what about that old man running across the temple at this young couple? We know this is Simeon, and in the text we don't have a lot of information about him. We do know that he was told he wouldn't die until he saw Jesus. And I can just see his eyes. Gray, hazel eyes, flecks of gray. They're just looking over the temple. For years they've been looking over this temple, seeing worshipers, mourners, people presenting newborns, day after day. And as he's looking one day, his eyes fall on this young couple. There's a man with worn hands holding his young wife, and she's just holding a baby to her chest and standing there. And as he's looking at him, he makes eye contact with the young woman, and recognition sweeps across his face. His eyes widen, and his wrinkles melt into a smile, and he starts running towards her. And as soon as he gets to her, Simeon scoops the baby up into his arms. Because this is what he had been waiting for. He knew it was coming. He knew Jesus would, he knew he was going to see the salvation of Israel, the hope of Israel, the rise that had been promised by the prophets. Jesus saw life in Jesus. Simeon saw life in Jesus, but life can be really scary for us sometimes. We have war, famine, death, disease, and all these things are coming to us from all our technology that we have, and it's all in our face. I had this friend in high school named Jesse. We were really close. We became good friends. And we even found out that when we were kids, like 5, 6 years old, our aunt had babysat both of us together, and then we didn't see each other until high school, and it just kind of was this weird coincidence. But Jessie had leukemia, and she went through the chemo, hair loss, all that. When I knew her the best, she looked relatively healthy. She had her hair. But I remember this one time she developed Bell's palsy. And Bell's palsy is this condition where your muscle lose function in one half of your body. And so she developed Bell's palsy in her face. So all of a sudden this girl that I knew, who I was good friends with, this happy girl, had the ability to smile taken away from her. It crushed me. One day, I remember getting this phone call, and as soon as I looked at the caller ID, I knew what it was. And I answered the phone, and I didn't even get hello out, and I just started bawling. And my friend was on the other side of the line, and she just told me that Jessie had died that morning. That totally rocked my world. I could not see any grace in that. She was 15, 2 weeks from being 16, and it set off a chain of events, and I started to lose my faith over so many years. I lost my focus on what was most important. I lost my focus on Jesus. And this is what we can learn from Simeon's story. Simeon kept his eyes on Jesus through all those years, and he knew he was coming. That was his focus. So as scary as life can be, we can find joy in the fact that we're saved. We can find joy in the fact that Jesus died for us. All that disease, all that war, all that stuff, our sins, that's all covered by the death and resurrection. I mentioned earlier that I was studying in a social work program, and we have this practice of using story to establish a context for the client. But I'm also a student at the seminary, and we have a different story. And this is a story of hope and faith, and it's a story of Jesus. Mary, we saw through the fear and the weakness, and we saw the strength in Jesus' resurrection. From Simeon, we learned to keep our focus on that. We're just another chapter in the story of God's grace, and our focus is on Jesus. Amen.